All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most important shifts in the Pega platform in years, the move to Constellation. We're going to break down what it is, why it was so necessary, and honestly, why it's a total game changer for developers and users.
But first, let's just start with a feeling we've all had. Why is it that so much of the software we use at work feels, well, slow? You click something, you wait, the whole screen flashes and reloads. It just feels clunky, like it's from a different decade of the internet. To get to the bottom of that, we have to look under the hood at Pega's traditional UI. This is the stuff a lot of us are familiar with, like UIKit and Theme Cosmos. And as we'll see, the source of all that frustration is baked right into its architecture. Okay, so at the core of the old way is something called server-side rendering, or SSR. The best way to think about this is to imagine the server as a chef. With SSR, the chef has to cook the entire meal, put it on the plate, add the garnish, do absolutely everything before sending that finished plate out to your table. The server does all the work, building the full HTML for the page, and then shipping that huge finished product over to you. And we're not talking about a small meal here. The amount of data being sent from the server, what we call the network payload, is a whopping 7 times larger in the old architecture. That is a ton of data to be sending back and forth for every little interaction.
And you feel this, right? The direct result for the user is an initial response time that's 10 times slower. That's the lag. That's the pause you feel after you click, waiting for the system to even begin to respond.
So what's the real culprit behind this bottleneck? Well, it all comes down to a concept called the stateful session. It's a fancy term, but what it means is simple. The server has to remember everything about what you are doing all the time.
Let me give you an analogy that makes this crystal clear. Think about a doctor's office. The old stateful way is like that office having a giant physical paper file for every single patient. Every time you move from one room to another, a nurse has to physically carry your entire history with them.
In Pega, that paper file is the Pega clipboard, and this approach causes a ton of problems. First, it just eats up server memory, the RAM, because it's holding on to every single person's file. That puts a hard limit on how many people can use the system at once. And what happens if the server holding your file goes down? Poof, your whole session is gone.
So, you can see this just wasn't sustainable. It was slow, it didn't scale well, a totally new approach was needed. And that's exactly why Pega went back to the drawing board and built a new foundation called Constellation.
Now, Constellation doesn't just tweak the old model. It flips it completely on its head. It's stateless and client-side. So instead of an overworked chef, the server is now just a super efficient waiter. It only brings you the raw ingredients, the data. All the actual cooking, rendering the UI, now happens right there at your table, inside your own browser. So how does that work in practice? Well, it's a pretty slick 3-step dance. First, the server sends only the bare essentials, super lightweight data in a format called JSON, along with some instructions on what to build. Then, a content delivery network provides all the standard building blocks of the interface. And finally, your browser uses a powerful engine called React.js to assemble everything and paint the screen right in front of you.
Okay, so we've covered the theory, but what's the actual payoff? How does this new way of doing things translate to real-world results? Well, let me tell you, the numbers are absolutely incredible. Just look at this side-by-side. It's not just a little better, it's a completely different league. The rendering moves from the server to you, the client. The session becomes stateless, freeing up server resources instantly. Payloads are 7 times smaller. Interactions feel 3 times faster. And the DOM, which is basically the blueprint of the web page your browser has to read, is 4 times smaller. It is a clean sweep across the board. But here's the thing, the benefits go way beyond just speed for the user. Constellation fundamentally changes how we build applications and, maybe even more importantly, how we keep them up to date over time.
This really is a massive shift in philosophy. The old way was all about customization. You could build anything you wanted, which sounds great, right? But in reality, it meant every project was a custom job that turned into an absolute nightmare during upgrades. Constellation focuses on configuration. You use a set of prescribed best practice templates. This leads to consistency and, here's the magic word, seamless upgrades. And what's the real-world result of that philosophical shift? Pure speed. By focusing on configuring pre-built, powerful components instead of coding every pixel from scratch, teams can build and deliver new applications at least 50% faster. That's a huge boost in productivity.
So,
The key takeaway here is that by standardizing the front end, all the pain of upgrades and technical debt just melts away. Instead of spending months trying to make an old application work with a new platform, teams can adopt new features almost instantly and focus on what actually matters, delivering value to the business.
Okay, this brings us to the final and I think the most important piece of this whole puzzle. We've talked about the tech, we've talked about the developers, but what does all this actually feel like for the person using the application every single day?
Constellation delivers what's called a true single-page application, or SPA. That means it feels less like a website and more like a fluid, modern app on your phone. You can handle really complex work without ever leaving the screen. No more of those jarring, disorienting jumps from one page to another. Everything just happens right where you are.
And the benefits for the user are just fantastic. I mean, think about it. No more full-screen flashes when you submit something. The browser's back button actually works the way you'd expect it to. You can open a case in a new tab without messing up what you were doing in the first one. Oh, and it's highly accessible for all users right out of the box. It's just a better, smarter, more modern way to work.
So we've seen how Constellation is faster, how it makes development easier, and how it creates a way better user experience. It really just leads to one final question. When you stop fighting with your platform, when you're not bogged down by performance issues and painful upgrades, when everything just works, what becomes possible? What can you build? What problems can you solve? That right there is the true promise of this incredible leap forward.